Well, today we're going to explain a little bit of how we got to Steamboat Springs and where it all started and what happened after we got to Steamboat Springs. It all began in Sollefteå, Sweden, which is north central Sweden, in 1921, where my dad over here with his twin and his older brother. They were all very avid sportsmen, all of them. And they grew up in a family. Actually, my grandfather was a tailor, and they had a women's and men's clothing shop in Sollefteå. And they lived above the store. Then, as I said, athletics was a large part of his life. He was into track, pole vaulting, and in 1948 he just missed the Swedish Olympic team in track. But he did make the 1948 Olympics in gymnastics. Gymnastics in 1948 was a demonstration sport, which meant the Olympic Committee was trying to decide if should we add gymnastics as a sport. So you tried out as you would do for any Olympic team, and he was one of the Swedish team. He did all events. He was an all-around gymnast. Then in 1948, that's after the Olympics, he went to he was teaching in the early part of winter at a Swedish ski resort, teaching skiing. And there was a Swedish family from Chicago that came back home and always spent their Christmases in Chicago. And they said to him, "Would you like to come to America, for 6 months?" And at that time, everybody wanted to come to the United States and would grab that chance in any second. But you had to have a sponsor in order to come and be here for that length of time. So they said, "We'll sponsor you. You come live with us, and then we go from there." So in 1948, and I can't tell you exactly, somewhere midwinter, he came to Chicago. And then, while he was in Chicago, his dream was to be a ski instructor in Lake Placid. Because that's all you heard about Lake Placid, and everybody had to go to Lake Placid. The Olympics were there in 1932, and his sponsor said, I don't really think you should go there. Then he saw a job opening, I believe it was in Arapahoe Basin, Loveland, something like that. And this guy was just kind of like hanging on, going, I don't know. Well, then he read about a job opening, possible job opening, at Western State College in Gunnison. They had a ski team. They had a Norwegian ski coach that was drunk all the time. They had it. They said, I think we're going to drop skiing. We don't know. And so Eric Lindgren, who was his sponsor, he said, "Sven, I insist that you apply for this job." Well, he couldn't speak any English.
Oh.
He spoke, he spoke very little English. And fast forward, they said, "Okay, we're not going to give him the job. He has to come and he has to show us what he can do. Put on a presentation. We want to meet this guy. We're skeptical, and especially if he's a Swede." So he hopped on the bus and got to Gunnison. The athletic director picked him up at the bus stop, and we find out later, he said to himself, "Can this little shit ski?" And all he could say was "yam and yelly, bacon and eggs. So while he was in trying out for the job, he lived at the Cattleman's Hotel, where you could eat and you could stay, and that's what he ate for months.
But
Then,
they didn't tell them that he couldn't speak English. So that
oh yeah, they didn't know he couldn't speak English when he arrived. So then, fast forward a bit, he did a gymnastics presentation, and he was hired on the spot. He became the assistant professor of health and physical education. He taught swimming, he taught tennis, all-around fitness, gymnastics, and then of course at the same time was hired as the head ski coach. This is the weenie wagon, they called it, and this is how in the early days the Western State ski team traveled, and they broke down a lot and had to push. This was one of the early pictures of the ski team in the 1950s. You'll see the longer skis here are the ski jumpers. The shorter skis here are the cross-country skiers. And then there was an alpine team as well. At that time, up until 1964, I believe, 64, 65, 64, he coached everything. Alpine, jumping, cross-country. One-man show. You didn't have assistant coaches at that time or any specialty. So 1949 to 1954, he was in Gunnison. He decided to take a 10-month leave and go back to Sweden and say, you know, do I want to live at home? Do I want to come back to the States? What do I want to do? So he came home. He had a good friend that was ahead of the Swedish Ski Association, and he said, I need a ski instructor way up north in Sweden at this hotel. Can you get us through while you're home? Sure, no problem. Well, my mother was working at that hotel. She's actually Danish, and after the war, everybody wanted to get out. And so she said to her parents, I'm going to Sweden. And so they said, okay, but whatever you do, don't marry a Swede. So then they met in January, they were engaged in April, and they were on their way back to the States in August. So Dad said, do you want to go to America? Oh, of course, you know, love to go. Let's go for a year. Okay, they came for a year. Then I came along, and we're still here. Skiing was a part of our life from as soon as I could ski. My mother was not a skier originally, being from Denmark with no snow, but she became one rather quickly. Then skiing started developing at Western after they had all their problems. In fact, if any of you know Crosby Perry Smith, he was actually one of the ones that said, we have to hire Sven. We need him. So in 1953, skiing became recognized by the NCAA with the, actually the driving force was the athletic director at Western State College. He, together with my father and other collegiate coaches at the time, were very instrumental in making skiing an NCAA sport. And in 1966, Western State was second place in the NCAAs at Crested Butte. So back to 1958, he was the FIS coach, which today means the World Championship coach, Nordic coach.
You had to be selected.
Oh yeah, coaches back in those days were chosen. They weren't hired. It wasn't a paid position, but you were chosen to be a coach. It wasn't until later 60s that you were actually hired as a U.S. ski team coach. And then in 1960, he was the Olympic coach in Squaw Valley. Prior to being an Olympic coach, you had to be a U.S. citizen. So at that time, he had to become a U.S. citizen to become the Olympic coach.
Is George's picture in there?
Yeah, without the hat.
Yeah. No.
How about the one, two, three,
Isn't
fourth from the left? Or
Here?
the right? No, the fourth from the right.
Here, that could be
George?
George.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then 1966, while he was still at Western State, he was a World University Games coach in Italy. He was the Nordic coach, but one of his his college athletes, Scott Piles, won the downhill, and he also medaled in the slalom. Here you have a picture of 1951. Skiing at, I believe they were skiing at Pioneer Hill in Crested Butte. And 60 years later, this picture was found and turned into the Crested Butte 50th anniversary poster for the skier. Here he was doing a bicycle slalom at a convention. People seem to like that picture. Because my mother at the resort in Sweden was what they called a hostess, and at that time in Sweden you had to be able to cook, you had to be able to sew, you had to be able to clean rooms, you had to be able to run the hotel if everything, step in anywhere that was needed. And Dad had been through plenty of that as well, and all through while they were in Gunnison, their dream was to build a lodge that was very similar to the ones in Sweden, where you feed people, you have food, you have lodging, and so they worked on the development of Scandinavian Lodge and Mount Warner Training Center through all these years. And in 1966, we purchased the land where Scandinavian Lodge is today. Burgess Creek Road was a Jeep road at that time. So it got developed as we were putting Scandinavian Lodge together. Here was a rendering before we were built. This was the main building. In this building on the top floor we had the kitchen, the dining room, and the middle section was large lobby, couple rooms, an office space, and then down on the bottom floor were all rooms. And this was our gymnasium building. The main floor was a gym. That was Dad's part, as you'll see what we did later. And then there was a ski jump in the works at that time. The ski jump actually didn't come and not looking like this, more like Howson Hill. A natural jump came in 1970. Let's see, I was in school, so it had been 76. Is that when we had no snow?
Yeah.
Yeah. So John Fetcher said, we need a ski jump. The Winter Sports Club kids need to be able to jump. We have no snow on Howson Hill. What are we going to do? And we had a north-facing slope that was very protected. And so we built a jump, and that was used for the Winter Sports Club kids that winter. Then it never got used much after that because then snowmaking came about, and that helped us. Here's an aerial view. We were kind of located in the center of the ski area. Burgess Creek Road continued up to the base of the Thunderhead Lift. So we had ski in, ski out access for all of our guests. They would walk up to Thunderhead or ski down on Why Not, come on to Why Not to get to the base. We housed and fed. We could house 120 guests. We fed them 3 meals a day. They were on the American plan, so when you made a reservation at the lodge, all your meals came with your room. The rooms were small, no TV, no telephone. And that became rather popular. There were some people that go, oh no, I can't live with that, I can't do that. Some decided to go, well, I'll try it, but I don't know. And then they turned out to be guests forever. They could come, they could get away. Also, we provided housing for all our employees. So they got room and board together with their salary, which today would be huge. In 1974, we built the swimming pool with another building which had larger accommodations. We had 13 condo units, about 400 square feet, a couple large guest rooms. We personally lived on the top floor. All the bottom floor was employee housing. And then we had saunas, both men's and women's saunas. And in the pool, you got in from the inside and you swam out to the outside, so you never had to get out in the snow.
That's the only building that stands.
What?
That's the only building that stands.
Oh, and today, that's the only building that still stands. We, in 1990, let's see, somewhere late 80s, 90s, my parents were ready. We were a family that ran the operation 24/7, 365. The phone was answered every day. There was never a machine. It was always by a person. We would take our guests to the bus stop at Harbor Hotel at 1 in the morning. We'd pick them up at 1 in the morning when they would arrive. And so after 20 years, I knew that I didn't want to live my next 20 years that way, even though there was nothing better. We've met the nicest people. We still have a group that are friends today. I'll tell you a funny story. In 1969, this couple came and they said, well, we've been we have a large group. Yeah, large group. Yeah, okay, whatever. Families. There's 4 of our families. All the guys went to college together. They were fraternity brothers. And we're thinking about moving away from Crested Butte, and we're checking out Steamboat, and tell us what you have to offer, you know. And oh yeah, we're gonna bring lots of people. Well, you think, okay, whatever. We started building in 68, 69 in March, we had moved in. They came and they said, Christmas, you know, we're coming with a lot of people. All these people happen to be Jewish. Yeah. And so, sure enough, they did. And this group, number one, the guy that came to investigate us, he was our Santa Claus. And he would not have missed it ever. They enjoyed Christmas as much as they enjoyed Hanukkah. They were wonderful people and still very close friends today. And they spent 20 Christmases with us, and the last Christmas with us, they had 42 people in their list. Girlfriends, boyfriends, grandkids, great-grandkids, we had them all. With that building, we also had a tennis court and Nick's famous timing shower. So we would run ski races. We had Tuesday night races. We had a 1 kilometer loop and a 3 kilometer loop right around the lodge. And Tuesday night we would have night races. And that was part of our training at the Winter Sports Club. You had to do the Tuesday night races, and we had a family in town. I don't know, is John still around? Ward? The Ward family, and there were how many kids? Four kids. Yeah, Stacy and Wendy. Yeah, 4 kids, and the girls were younger, but the younger kids always had to go first. Then came the older groups. Well, the young kids got out in the woods, got scared in the dark. We all had headlamps on. Got scared in the dark. They would wait for their brothers to come, and they'd ski behind them, and then their brothers just took off, and then they were still scared. But after they would come in, then they would come in for Swedish rolls and hot chocolate after that. But another thing, we had a time clock in that time shack where you could punch in a cardstock, time yourself, put your piece of paper in a slot, go run or ski and come back and punch it in again, so you could do your own timing training, and that was used quite a bit. Come winter, we did a lot of ski touring and cross-country racing educational programs of various kinds. Junior race camp, citizen cross-country race camp, and mom and dad coaches school. Ski dealers. We would teach people how to promote the sport, how to sell equipment, so people would enjoy skiing forever. When we did it at the lodge, but also September and October, Dad would travel the country and do a dealer clinic in sports shops, a lot in the Midwest and a lot in the East as well.
Would you read that where it says cost tuition 3 nights?
Yes, read that. 3 nights lodging with 9 meals, double occupancy, $100.50.
Sign me up.
Thanksgiving clinics started in Crested Butte, and the Thanksgiving clinics were for people like you. We had various levels. You would learn instruction, you would get better, we would take tours. So it was a weekend where people arrived on Wednesday night, and we finished after lunch on Sunday. Then when we came to Steamboat, we started that right up, and we didn't miss a beat. And I remember we were looking for a place before the lodge was being built, so we didn't have a place that Thanksgiving of 68 to do it. So we approached the rancher, what's his name, Moore? What's the first name, Moore?
Jerry Moore?
Jerry Moore. And that is in the neighborhood where across from the Porches is today, all that land. So that's where our first Thanksgiving clinic was. And then when we got to the lodge, then we continued up there and did many tours on Rabbit Ears Pass. Every morning at breakfast, we would announce where the tour was going for the day, how many sack lunches do we need, and there we would go. And every morning we would get called, where's your tour going today? It's going here and here. Okay, well, who's coming behind? Because then they didn't have to break trail.
Nice.
Then it came springtime, and we started the Rabbit Ears race, which started at Dumont Lake and ended up at Bear Pole Ranch, or down at the bottom of Rabbit Ears Pass. Professional Ski Instructors of America were a large part of Dad's life. He was very instrumental in writing the first book of how to teach cross-country ski, and was chief examiner for Nordic for many years. He also was very active in the American Red Cross in swimming, and aided them as well in writing manuals on teaching children to swim back in the early days. And he started the swim team in Steamboat. I was on the swim team in Gunnison, And I said, I'm not moving to Steamboat. I don't want to move to Steamboat. That was the worst thing we could do. And coming from a college town that was very active, very, there's always things to do, upbeat, and then you're coming to Steamboat with 2,000 people. And it's like, you know, this boring town. And now I'm so glad we did. So I said, but I can't swim anymore. What am I going to do? Well, we'll start a swim team. So in the summer of 1969, he started the local swim team. And also, well, that was the summer, well, even in the winter of 68, I can backtrack a little bit, we did night races. We started night races in the park. Is that Little Toots Park? Mm-hmm. Little Toots Park. Mm-hmm. So we would all gather in the log building there, and we had a course out in the park, and we'd ski. We were living on 6th Street. Gates and Doris Gooding rented us their house on 6th Street, and we would ski all over town. You'd put your skis on outside your door, we'd ski down to the park, we'd race around the park, and then we'd ski home. The summers at the lodge were spent doing camps of many different kinds. We did gymnastics camps. Soccer camps were a big part. My dad put on many soccer camps for local kids. Volleyball camps. We did many weddings. Does anybody recognize these two? What year was that?
78.
78. So Shine and Russ's wedding was one of the first ones I believe we did, and we ended up doing over 100 and some weddings where we did everything. Today we couldn't do a wedding like we did then. We went out and we picked wildflowers, and we had buckets. We did all the arch, and then we did all the food as well. Anything to add?
It was wonderful. It was a beautiful day. The next day it snowed.
Oh my.
Really?
Yeah, in September.
In September. My mother enjoyed the arts. She was a potter. Was a potter. And so she went to Herb Schumacher at the University of Northern Colorado and said, would you like to have a pottery workshop at the lodge? And they got all excited. And so for many years, we had 2 weeks of pottery workshops in the summer. And they would fire your traditional way. Did we miss that other slide?
Yeah, I think we did.
Oh, we missed a slide. And then they built a kiln as well, and fired pottery the way we do today. We would have batik workshops. I don't have a picture, but we have jewelry workshops by some famous jewelers. Nelda Getty, which one of them was? Oh, let me backtrack to the weddings really quick. We did the wedding for the niece of Henry Fonda. And her father was ill and could not walk her down the aisle. So Henry came. And that was a lot of fun for us. It was a lot of fun for him, because when he left, he said, thank you. Not one person asked me for an autograph. I'm just a normal person, and I could enjoy the wedding as I did. So that was kind of fun. My mother is a weaver. So that's things that, both she and I enjoy in the off time as well. And tradition was also very much a part, and still is a part. At the lodge, we would do Santa Lucia, which is the beginning of Christmas on the 13th of December. And Marion Tolles has been there many a time, and the kids. They were part of our... I could not find any Lucia pictures from the lodge. So, and they would come and have dinner, and they would share their tradition with us, and Yeah.
Hey, Birgitta.
Yeah.
Marion said she thinks she has some.
Do you?
I think I'll have to dig them out of me, but
Well, if you find any at any time, let me know. So in 1972, 71, 72, the owner of Telemark Lodge, Tony Wise, called my dad and said, I need some ski trails developed for our people to ski on. Can you come do that? He did. He went and he designed all their touring trails. And then after that was finished, Tony said, you know, how can we get a lot of people here? What can we do? And Dad said, well, you know, in Sweden, there's this race called the Vasaloppet, where they have 15,000 people like you and elite racers that race 90 kilometers. And there is then a race in Norway, the Norwegian Birkebeiner. So why don't we think of something like that and copy the Norwegian Birkebeiner? So that led to him designing the first original American Birkebeiner course. And what year was this? 2005. Yeah, so in 2005, he was 85 years old. Oh, he has skied it 6-7 times, completed it. But he was determined. Skating was a new technique. He was a classic skier forever, and when skating came about, he was determined to master skating. And he did, and at 85 years old, he finished 55 kilometers of the American Birkie. And he ended up third place. The Steamboat ski area was doing a promotional movie, their new promotional movie called Steamboat, I Like It Here. And a portion of that movie was dedicated to the history of skiing in Steamboat, which of course started with Carl Halson. He was asked to be Carl Halson in that movie. All was great. And they were standing around Halson Hill doing some filming as the stagecoach came in, and my mother was standing there, and they said, now we have to do a jumping picture, but who are we going to get to stand in and be Carl Halson on the jumps? And my mom says, Sven's going to do it. He'll do it. And they looked at her and said, really? Oh yeah, he'll do it. They came here, got jumping skis from the museum, and he jumped off the small hills for the movie at Halson Hill.
At 85.
No. That was in the that was 76, I think it was. 74, 5, 6, somewhere in there. We had the 1974 North American Cross Country Ski Championships in Strawberry Park. He designed all those courses. The 1976 Olympics were in the thoughts, and even though at that time you had to have everything in one location, so Evergreen was the designated spot for cross country, and everybody goes, there's no snow in Evergreen, but that's how we got the Olympics. But then the whole idea was, once we got the Olympics, then we were going to move skiing to Steamboat, cross-country skiing. And so this was the test of Olympic trails in Strawberry Park. This gentleman happens to be, and I don't know if you've heard him, I'm sure you've heard of him on TV many times, our world-known sports announcer Peter Graves. He was skiing for Fort Lewis College at that time. And then the 1976 Olympics that never was. But he had designed all the trails for the Olympics for the bids at that time. Then comes Olympics in 1980. We as a family were there. Dad was chief steward. My mother and I were working for him. Chief steward meant that you were in charge of all course control people out on the courses, bib taking, traffic control, all that kind of thing. And here you have Marvin Crawford. Greg Crawford was all there as well. This is at the opening ceremonies. He was honored many times, of which Colorado Ski Hall of Fame, National Ski Hall of Fame, Western State College Sports Hall of Fame, and many others as well for what he's done for skiing. He was also an inventor. His dream was the posi track, and the idea this was to be a training machine, of which it was computerized, so we could put any course in the country. We put the courses in at the touring center. It was more or less like a treadmill, but it would go up, it would go down. You had it, and you have to be at the controls to make sure you stop the button really fast, which I'd been sent off the back many a time. But we didn't have the money to make it real successful. However, University of Oregon bought one, the Canadian National Ski Team got one, and then it didn't go much farther, but I enjoyed that, skiing on that, more than anything because I couldn't get lazy. I had no choice and I could ski. And so skiing on that a lot made your winter skiing a lot easier, better, you were in shape, so forth. He authored 2 books. The first one way back in the late 50s, early 60s, cross-country skiing, training, and racing. And then the Regnery Guide to Ski Touring. He was featured in the United Mainliner magazine, the main magazine for United Airlines. Winter Carnival, they were chosen as the Grand Marshals. I was Carnival Queen, and Diane was also attendance. We were both part of the Winter Sports Club, which was a large part of both of our lives. Then, after he retired and we were out of the lodge 100%, he began really master skiing and racing. And he traveled all over. This picture was in Switzerland. This particular race, they had so much snow they had to be helicoptered in. It was the only way they could get to the event. We were in France, Canada, Sweden, Finland, McCall, Idaho. He enjoyed that very much. And his medals to prove it. With his good friend, Gordy Wren. And I don't know if you know that Gordy Wren is the only athlete to this day that qualified for the Olympics in all 4 events. Jumping, cross country, downhill, and slalom. He chose he had to choose one. He chose jumping, and the Ski Association was very upset with him. And I meant to look it up, but all I recall is after the event, he was one of the best hit results that the jumpers had had up until recently. Then, in 1982, the ski area, the touring center the building was there, the trails were there. It was kind of hodgepodge. Storm Hut, Werner Storm Hut had the shop. The ski area had the trail system. And I can't recall, somebody else had the food service. And for 3 people to try and make anything go, that was tough. Then the Sheridan bought the land, and then they thought, great, now we have work for our summer employees. Golfers know nothing about skiing. That'd be like me running a golf course. So Hans Geyer came to us and said, we have, in the sale of, which is now the Sheridan, it was stipulated that the touring center had to be a touring center for a minimum of 25 years. No choice. How that came about, I don't know. So Hans Geyer said, you're the cross-country ski people. You do it all the time. Would you be interested in taking over the touring center? And we said, well, if we can make the arrangements, yes, we would. So that's how we got there. We have snowshoeing, we have skate skiing, we have classic skiing. Then we began to build Bruce's Trail. Bruce's Trail came about, we were skiing on trails in the Meadows campground up on the pass. And we had Europeans, the Finns would come for high altitude training and ski on those trails. And it's a long story, but the Forest Service said, can't do that anymore. There's reasons, but we're not going there. But we said, what is our other option? What can we do? Well, you can go across the street, across the road, highway, up a little farther. And so there was a large group of which Nick was involved with, building Bruce's Trail. Here's a whole album on that. And Bruce's Trail was named after a good friend of all of our ski people who was killed on Mount Warner Road, riding his bike, and a dump truck, a drunk pumper truck driver, crossed right in front of him and killed him. So we named the trail after Bruce, who skied a lot. Then Kaiser came along. And then 1998, we were all very much a part of the World Cup that we had in Steamboat for the first time. We hosted many fundraiser events, yes. Colorado Ski for Women, which was one, benefiting what used to be called Advocates Against Battering and Abuse. Then my husband passed away, and we started Nordic Fest, which raised money for up-and-coming Winter Sports Club Nordic skiers, and we gave out scholarships. We had pig roast, and we raised money to help them with their skiing. Then came Haymaker. Then we acquired Haymaker to encompass everything. There we all are.
How many generations?
And so, yeah, we're on third generation now. And this was Dad's last day of skiing at age 95. That was in January. He would have skied many more days, but it was so cold that winter. He wasn't fond of really going out in the cold. And he had, in the last year or so, he had to have oxygen. Yes, you have to ski with your oxygen. I don't want to ski with my oxygen. You have to ski. And Nick was so good, he would, what do you call it, Sven Wiik loop. Yeah. So he would lay a track around our whole teaching area, and then Dad would ski around and around in circles.
But there were two tracks next to each other, so I could ski and hold his oxygen, because otherwise I wouldn't ski. And then he could ski next to me. But the thing was, he never realized that there was a cord tying us together. So he would try to out-ski me, and I'd be like, no way, we're tied together!
And now it's Kaisa and I with our great team. This winter will be our 40th winter at the Touring Center and our 9th winter at Haymaker. Any questions? Great. Thanks for coming. If you'd like to see any pictures here, you're welcome to.
There's some great albums there. Oh my God. Oh yeah, you need to look through those. Yep.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.